Chelsea, Manchester United, a fixture that over the years has thrown up some of the most memorable moments in Chelsea's history. I think back to Joe Cole scoring that fantastic goal to win us the Premier League all those years ago. And then we go to an even more recent time where we've seen Cole Palmer step up in the dying minutes to win Chelsea the game. And I just think that maybe we're going to need a little bit of magic again to win this one. We are in an incredibly fortunate position that Champions League qualification is still in our hands. Which, going into this point in the season, I think if you'd offered me that at the beginning of the season, I would have snapped your hand off. I would have said, wow, fair enough, what an opportunity. When you kind of dress it up a little bit more, you realise that we're still on the same amount of points that we were at this point finishing the season last year at 63. So, well, look, we could finish 6 points better off than we did last season, which that's not a bad step forward. When you look at the other teams, especially a team like Manchester United, how much they've regressed, 20 points pretty much, a 6-point improvement is actually a step in the right direction. And maybe when I take a step back at the end of the season and I look at how the season's gone, I might be pretty okay with that. But diving into this Manchester United game, a draw away at Old Trafford earlier on in the season, everything is to play for. But I genuinely think we're playing a worse off Manchester United than we did earlier on in the season. I look at that United team. They haven't won a Premier League game for 2 months now. Yes, they're in a Europa League final, but their Premier League form has been pretty woeful. In recent weeks, they've conceded 4 goals to Brentford, 2 to West Ham. I mean, they've lost to Wolves, obviously, Newcastle. They've lost to Forest. I'm just looking at the teams here. The last result they got was 3-0 against Leicester. It's just not very impressive from them in the Premier League. And Ruben Amorim, I've touched on it in another video. And if you haven't checked on that, it's my last video. I'll link it somewhere up here. But I've been so underwhelmed by Amorim. And I think when I look at Chelsea, I think this should be pretty comfortable. Now, we'll go to the major issue I think Chelsea have around this whole fixture. And I genuinely think it's Nicholas Jackson. I'm so frustrated still. The more I've thought about that, the more disappointed I am. It was so avoidable, that moment. I think I've watched the VAR back and they say everything that we all saw, and you just can't disagree with them that it was a clear red card. And it's a moment of stupidity, but it's behind us now. But I think back to a few weeks ago where Chelsea have played without a striker, and I just don't think the team felt as balanced. I don't think it felt as comfortable as what it's done with the return of Nicholas Jackson. Now, I don't know the fitness of Mark Guy, and I know he's been training separately. I know Nkunku's had an issue. Potentially he has, potentially he hasn't. But I feel like Nkunku, maybe we call upon him, because as much as he's offered little, does he just bow out with a couple of goals at Chelsea? Because inevitably, I think he's facing his last couple of games for Chelsea. I'm not sure what Maresca will do, but for me, the balance of the team has looked far better with a striker in the side. And that's why I view that as the massive issue, because not because we won't have goals from other areas. I just think the way Maresca's system has worked, the way that a striker has sort of helped everyone else interlink with each other and they hold up the ball. You think about Jackson, he's held up the ball, he's tried to bring others into play. I just think it ticks along a little bit better when he's in that side. I just worry about that a little bit. Goal threat, I'm not so concerned about. I feel like, I don't know if Sancho can play. I'm not sure about that. So I'd expect Neto Madueke to be starting. I think there's goals in Madueke for sure. Neto, I'm not so sold on in terms of goal output, but I do think he's a danger man. I think he always takes a defender with him. He might even occupy the forward line, even though I'm not so sure about that. But maybe we do give someone like Tyreek George an opportunity in this game. But I'm looking at players like Enzo Fernandez, Cole Palmer. They're the sort of players that in a game like this, they need to show their quality. And where they've scored goals this season, they need to do it again. Cole Palmer hasn't had a goal in open play in a while. For me, there's just something about this Manchester United fixture that I've had my eye on that I really feel like this could be Cole's moment to get a goal in open play, because it's United. You know, it's a team he wants to do well against. Not because he hates them, but because this is a club that is from his hometown. It's meant a lot to him throughout his life. And I think he wants to always show that he can do it at the level of the club that he's, you know, that has been a part of his life. And I think we saw that in the last fixture at the end of last season, or against Manchester United. I think we saw him step up, and we saw him go to a level above what we've seen him be at, sometimes this season. So big emphasis on some of our other players stepping up here and trying to get Chelsea the win. When I look at Manchester United as well, attacking output, I think they've been very, very limited, which is an absolute blessing for our defensive line, because you can't deny it. Again this season, I think there's been issues with Chelsea defensively. I just think there has. We had it last year with Poch. I know we've been better this season, but we've let a lot of games get away from us with, shoddy defending or individual errors. And I just think when I look at Manchester United's attack, it doesn't concern me too much. And I feel like most of the defence should be able to cope with anything Manchester United can throw at us. I think a Cucurella, I feel like he'll be pretty comfortable no matter who Manchester United have out on that side. By the way, I really feel like an inversion against Manchester United where that midfield is sometimes a little bit slow, a little bit laborious. Sometimes they lack a bit of quality. They're a little bit indecisive. An extra man going in there, the inversion, it could cause havoc. But with their wing-backs, if Amorim does decide to play them, I know he's gone away from it at times, it could also cause us a huge issue. And I'm intrigued to see how that works, really, because losing a man from a defensive position into a central area for Chelsea, I understand the benefit against Manchester United's midfield, but I completely understand that there'll be a huge overload if that player can't get back out. So I'm intrigued to see whether Caicedo plays at right back again and inverts. I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. But I do think, again, Lavia has been incredibly key to the midfield at Chelsea and the way Maresca wants his system to work. And I just think if he takes Lavia out again, does it just tick along a little bit nicer with Lavia in? But the issue for me is Caicedo's our player of the season. And it's another player that we might potentially be playing out of position. And that's something that I always think, if a player has been that good to win player of the season, you play them in their best position. And I think that's something for me where seeing him in that inverted right back role with teams that look to utilise the wide areas, I feel like that sort of isolates him a little bit more. It causes him a bit of an issue. He doesn't know whether to go into midfield at times because he is worried of the threat. And when he does go, the threat takes advantage of the space that he vacates. We saw it against Spurs. We saw it a little bit against Newcastle. It just becomes a little bit confusing for that player, I think, in that moment. So we'll see how that goes. But I'm confident in a way against this United team because of how poor they've been in the league. So for me, I'm expecting the Chelsea win. I think what's going to be so key, and I will touch on Maresca in a second, but I think the fans have got a huge part to play in this fixture. This is Manchester United. We know the atmosphere is drummed right up for this game. And this means more than the majority of the other games we've had this season. This is 3 points that we cannot afford to not get. We have to get this. In the hunt for Champions League football, I think getting 60, if we can get ourselves onto 66 points, that's a tally that has got team Champions League football before. Now, I know this season's a lot tighter in that respect, but for me, this is a massive 3 points. It's our last home game of the season, and it means everything. So I think fan base has to be fully at it. Friday night, at the bridge, under the lights, goodness me, what a game it's going to be. We, as a fan base, have to absolutely get behind the team. No matter what we think of the manager, no matter what we think of performances this season, we've got to back them all the way to that final whistle. Because we saw that when we got on top of that team last year, the atmosphere sort of lifted when Cole Palmer got the equaliser. It pushed us on to go and get that winner. And I just think in a game like this, the atmosphere, Stamford Bridge rocking, can win you the game. It can be that powerful. So, as a fan base, turn up tomorrow as loud as we can. Friday as loud as we can, and please, can Maresca get it right? Because if Maresca gets it right against a pretty lacklustre Manchester United team, I think the game becomes a lot easier. I really do. I think there's weaknesses in that United side. There's some injury concerns. There's thoughts about their Europa League final. I mean, Amorim said he's trying to play the kids. He doesn't want to risk players because he wants all of his players available. We saw how annoyed he was when Lenny Yoro got injured. For me, we have to get it right. I think we need to pressure their back line. I think when you pressure this back line and this Manchester United defence, I don't think they look that comfortable. I think they'll look for outballs to their wide areas. I think if we can, if we let them go wide, I think we can deal with that with who we'll have in defensive areas. And I think if we don't and we allow them to play through the middle, I then think the second press has to step up and really put some pressure on the players they're going to have in midfield, because I think that this Manchester United team, physically, when challenged, when pressed, when given a game, they don't cope very well in the Premier League. And I think that's where Chelsea need to go and irritate this Manchester United team. When they're in possession, in vulnerable areas, we need to hound them down. We really do. And then I think if we can win the ball, we've got to transition well. And I think we've seen a number of times that that's where Chelsea's strength lies. If Manchester United are allowed to fall into a low block and we're slow and lumberous in possession, that's where I worry about whether or not we'll have enough to break that team down. Because I actually think, when I look at some of their defenders, they probably thrive in a low block and a real sort of defensive performance than they do in an open game of football. So, all to play for. An incredibly tough fixture against one of the biggest sides in the Premier League, but they are having the worst season in their history. I'll remind you that they're currently 16th in the Premier League, and I think they've had 17th losses. Manchester United, with 2 games to go in the Premier League, are yet to hit 40 points. This is a game that Chelsea cannot afford to lose, and fingers crossed we manage to do it. Look, drop your support in the comments down below about this game. Let me know who you want to see in the team. Drop a like on the video if you haven't already, and I will catch you in the next one. Fingers crossed, we're 3 points closer to Champions League football. Come on, Chelsea.